Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and iOS 15 Beta 1 has been out for about a week at this point. It seems like just yesterday it was announced, and now we know everything in it, at least from what Apple told us, but there's a few new features I wanted to share with you as well. I also wanted to share with you the overall experience, any remaining bugs, and just how it is stability-wise and whether or not you should install it, and also when to expect it. Now, I've been using it full time on my iPhone 12 Pro Max since the day it came out, so I have a pretty good idea of how it is, at least for me. And then I also have it on the iPhone 6s Plus and the iPhone 11 to give you an idea of performance based on different devices. I'm also running iPadOS 15 Beta 1 on my M1 iPad Pro 12.9. I've been running it full time there. So when I'm not editing a video, I generally use the iPad. So the overall experience has been pretty decent, but I'll talk more about that in a moment. But first, I wanted to talk about a couple new features. And the first thing is if we go into Notes, and one of the features you're probably already familiar with is you can go into a photo and copy text out of that photo. Well, if you go into Notes and you tap, you can now tap on Text from Camera. If you tap on Text from Camera, it opens up the camera in the bottom, and then it can recognize text in the camera frame. So you'll see right there, it sees 82 degrees. If I go down a little bit, maybe right to this text here, it recognizes what it's saying on the weather app, and it's automatically filling it in on the top. We can do the same on the iPad. So maybe we go over to the Tips app here, and it's seeing that. If we want to capture that, we tap on Insert, and it captures that directly from the image. So that's something that's a little bit new that we didn't see before. You can still go into the image afterwards if you take a photo and pull text out of it, but you can do it in real time too using the Notes app or any other place you can actually paste text. Now, another thing is iCloud Plus. People have been asking me about iCloud Plus quite a bit, so let's take a closer look at that. Now, if we go into Settings and then tap on your name at the top, then you want to tap on iCloud, and the first time you do this, you'll get a pop-up for iCloud Plus asking you if you want to sign up. Generally, if you pay for a more expensive plan, it's included, but it's about 99 cents a month if you don't have it. And what it can do is hide your overall internet traffic, very similar to what a VPN does, and also hide your email. It can create a different email address. I'll show you that in a moment. But you can go and turn on Private Relay. In Private Relay, you'll see it says here, Private Relay hides your IP address and Safari browsing activity from network providers and websites so that no one, including Apple, can see both who you are and what sites you're visiting. So you can turn that on or off. Now, initially, people are having problems accessing the internet, and if you are, turn it off and that will fix the problem. So if you turn off Private Relay, I think because it's an early feature, sometimes it's creating an issue, and generally your internet will just speed up overall. If we go back, tap on Hide My Email. Now, under Hide My Email, it says, hide my email. Keep your personal email address private by creating a unique random address that forwards to your personal inbox and can be deleted at any time. It gives a general email address, and it says important. If you need to reference or manage this address, you can find it in iCloud settings. So you can continue or use a different address. It creates that one, and then you have the option to forward that to yourself, your regular email address. This way it hides any information. Maybe you're sending an email to someone. You don't want them to have your general personal email address. This is a way to do that. So it's a really nice feature, and you can do this within many other apps as well. And so basically it takes the place of a VPN or even an email service that helps to keep things private. And it's built right in and is definitely worth it if you use a VPN and you just don't want people tracking you in general. So those are two new features. Now, also back in iCloud settings, there's a new setting in iCloud backup. You can now back up over cellular. So if you don't have a Wi-Fi connection and you have unlimited data on your cellular plan, you can now back up your phone without having to use a cellular connection. It says when not connected to Wi-Fi, use your cellular network to back up to iCloud. This may cause you to exceed your cellular data plan. So it's warning you, but as long as you have an unlimited plan, you can turn that on. So it's a nice little feature they've added, especially for those that don't have Wi-Fi at home and just prefer to have a cellular data plan. So that's something that's really nice. Now, I will be covering a lot more features in a different video, but I wanted to share those few with you this time. And in using iOS 15 Beta 1, every single day since it came out, it's actually the most stable Beta 1 I've used. And that's actually saying a lot. I've used every single beta, and so far this has been the most stable. Now, that does not mean it doesn't have issues, but for an early beta, generally sometimes they're unusable. For me, earlier ones, iOS 11, iOS 13, Usually I would have to revert to a different version so I could use it on my main device because there were so many odd issues with it. This one so far is usable. However, it does have bugs. So for me, it's the most stable in a long time. With beta 2 or 3, it could get much, much better. And I'll talk more about when to expect those later on. Now, I have had a couple resprings, and that means where it just reloads everything and has your little spinning wheel in the middle. I have had that happen a couple times on my iPhone 12 Pro Max, and I've also had it crash in different apps a few times. Before filming this video, about a half hour ago or so, messages actually crashed on me. I was sending a photo to someone and it just crashed. So this is definitely something that's not 100% stable, but again, it's not bad for an early beta. If I go into music, music was having some issues, and quite a few people are reporting this as well, where music will glitch and sometimes it will just reload. Or maybe you're playing a song, sometimes it will just stop after 15 seconds. So there's some issues within music with iOS 15, but again, it's an early beta. This is to be expected. But in general, it seems pretty good. I have had it stop a couple times, but most of the time it works well. The issue I'm having are mostly graphical issues. It will just keep reloading this page as I scroll, or if I go to artists or go to browse, for example. Sometimes it will reload and just sort of glitch in general. So it's working okay right now, but sometimes it's not what you would expect. Also, Bluetooth is actually surprisingly good for me. Now, this is not the case for everyone. I'll talk about that in a second, but I haven't had it disconnect from my AirPods, for example, and it's working well with my car. So that's a good sign with iOS 15 so far. It's better for me so far than it was on iOS 14.7 or 14.6. Now, issues many of you have been complaining about with iOS 15 Beta 1 is that the phone is getting hot. And so whether it be charging or you're just using it regularly, a lot of people are complaining that it's getting very warm. So far, that really hasn't happened to me. Maybe once I noticed it was a little warm, but generally it's been okay for me. But quite a few people have mentioned this, so it's definitely an issue for some. So it's getting warmer than it normally would. And also battery life is worse, which means generally when it's getting warmer, the processor's working harder and it would use more power. So that makes sense. If you're having worse battery life, maybe something's going on in the background. Being that it's an early beta and they're still working on things, there's going to be issues. Also, quite a few people are saying that they're having issues with FaceTime, whether it means it's unusable, and you can see you can put multiple apps. I just did that for a different video. But in general, FaceTime's okay, but there's some features that aren't there yet 100%, and some people are just having glitches with it overall where it just won't connect or it hangs up and things like that. So there's definitely some issues. The same is true in Safari. So if I go into Safari, you'll see it loads here. It's okay for me. Again, if it doesn't load properly, make sure private relay is turned off. That usually fixes that issue. I would imagine Apple's working on their server side with that, and sometimes there's issues with it. So if their server goes down, private relay won't work properly, or maybe they're updating it. So keep that in mind with early betas. So you may have issues with that. Others do report problems with Bluetooth, whether that be disconnecting or just having low quality sound in general. They are reporting problems. There are quite a few people reporting it. Thankfully, I haven't experienced that, but there's enough people having that issue that it's worth mentioning. Also, Wi-Fi connectivity seems to be an issue for some. Again, I haven't experienced that yet, but some people have had that issue. Again, check for private relay, as that seems to be a big problem, and that may be causing some of your issues. Now, as far as lag and stuttering and app crashes, quite a few of you are saying the same thing. So maybe you're on an older device, an iPhone 6s Plus. I noticed when I booted this up for the first time since the couple days ago when I installed it, it was very slow to respond. I airdropped this wallpaper to it, and it took quite a while to show up. Everything was really slow. Now, it seems okay now, but initially it was very, very slow. So people are having strange stuttering and app crashes, and then random restarts and resprings like I mentioned before. So there are definitely issues with this beta, and some people have had to revert back to other versions. Again, it's the most stable in a long time for a beta 1 though. Now, as far as green tint, I wanted to mention it, but not a single person mentioned it in the comments. Over 200 comments, not one person mentioned that it was a problem on the iPhone 12. So I don't know if that means it's fixed with iOS 15, but no one mentioned it whatsoever, which is a pretty good sign. Usually we get a few mentions of it in those comments on the community poll. So that's a good sign in general. Now, as far as overall performance, well, I showed you that a little bit with the iPhone 6s Plus and with the iPhone 11. The good thing is it doesn't seem any slower, at least to me, compared to, say, iOS 14.7. In fact, it might be a little faster once it's booted up and then has a time to process things in the background. So it seems pretty fast in general. So if we go back, and it is an early beta, but it seems to be very good in general when loading different apps, whether you're going into music, for example, going into library, scrolling, opening different apps for an early beta on something like an iPhone 6s Plus that Apple is surprisingly still supporting, which is great. It's very, very good. So that's a good thing to see. But again, when I rebooted this, it was very slow for quite a while, maybe for a good 2 to 3 minutes. So it's much better now, but it can have those glitches. Now, as far as the iPadOS 15 Beta 1 has actually been pretty good. And so on iPadOS 15 Beta 1, it seems to be okay. I haven't had as many crashes as I have on iOS 15, for example, and the overall speed, being that this is newer, I would expect to be pretty good as well. But in general, I haven't had too many issues other than with some odd things with widgets, but I've experienced that. I did have some widgets blank on my iPhone, which I forgot to mention, that I had to reboot it to get those back. So there's still some things going on with widgets, but the overall experience, the smoothness of opening the app drawer, for example, or the app library is just very, very smooth. So it seems to be performing quite good. It's fast overall. And I wanted to talk about battery life also. Now, battery life in the past on iOS 14.7 versions has not been great on my iPad, but this one seems to be okay so far. So we'll go to battery. And if I go to the last 10 days, you'll see it was last charged to 100% an hour ago. But yesterday I used it 5 hours and 32 minutes, and you can see that it was a little over 50% of the battery gone. The day before, I used it for 2 hours and 42 minutes. So it just varies from day to day. But in general, 8 to 10 hours of screen on time on the iPad, even with a first early beta of iOS or iPadOS 15, seems to be quite good. Now, on the iPhone, it depends on the phone. It seems very different depending on who you ask. And so with iOS 15 Beta 1, if we go to the settings, we'll go down to battery health. They haven't made any updates to this, and my battery capacity is still at 100%. And we'll go to the last 10 days, and this varies greatly depending on the day. So today, I've used it 3 hours and 39 minutes and had screen off time of 1 hour and 46 minutes. I've used it a little over 50%. So that means I'd get about 7 hours of screen on time with about 3 hours or 3.5 hours of screen off time. The day before, I used a little bit more power. The day before that, I used it very little and had terrible battery life. It seems to be improving as days go on, and I would expect that as things are finished processing in the background, the photo library is done analyzing everything, I would expect improvements over the next few days, and that should improve things a lot with battery life. Now, of course, being an early beta, we shouldn't care too much about this, but it is worth noting that it's pretty good, and it will probably improve. Some people say it's really good. Other people say it's very bad. It just depends on who you ask. And it seems like on the newer device so far, it's been okay for me. Now, as far as should you install iOS 15 Beta 1? Well, if you're a beta tester or a developer, you probably already have at this point. But I never recommend someone install a Beta 1 on any of their main devices. Now, you may or may not do this, but as long as you have the ability to go back to the previous version, whether that be on a Mac or a Windows computer, then that's fine, but be willing to lose everything and have to restore from a backup if you're going to try these betas out. Generally, I would wait for the public beta to come out before installing this. So iOS 15 public beta 1, I would expect within a couple weeks. Usually by beta 2 or beta 3, they'll release that to the public. It just depends on how stable they think it is at that point. Now, beta 2, I would generally expect around the 21st, with maybe beta 3 on the 5th or so. It just depends on what Apple does this time, but as they get closer to the final release, they'll release them more quickly, usually every 2 weeks, and then every 1 week is normally how they do it, until September when it releases to the public. Now, as far as the public beta, it could be with beta 2 or beta 3 again, so it just depends on what they decide to do with that. Now, as far as iOS 14 betas or 14.7 betas, they will continue until September when iOS 15 releases if Apple continues to do what they've done in the past. That means we're still waiting for 14.7 beta 3 or public beta 2, and I would expect that this coming week, at least to have a beta 3, maybe even a release candidate if they decide to push this out really early. Sometimes Apple does that very quickly. It just depends on what they decide to do, but they will still have iOS 14 betas until then with security updates and minor updates as well, and then 15 with all the new features later on. Now, as far as the overall statistics of people that had issues with batteries and everything, I wanted to share that before we went into the YouTube community poll. Here's all the issues people mentioned with batteries and the phone getting warm and freezing, for example. And then here's all the different devices you're using. So again, iPhone 11 remains popular. The iPhone 12 Pro Max and iPhone 12 are also popular, and iPad as well. So quite a few people are having okay experiences with this, and it's great to see all the different devices people are using when using the betas. Now let's go ahead and take a look at YouTube. So we'll go to the YouTube community poll, and you'll see at the time of this video, let me refresh it here. At the time of this video, there's 20,000 votes. So I'm grateful to everyone that voted. I really appreciate it. And those of you that installed it, there's 20% that said it's great for a first beta. 4% said it's terrible and worse than iOS 13 beta 1, which is pretty bad. 7% said it's okay, but still has some major bugs. And then 7% of you are using iOS 14.7 betas, and 61% of you are using 14.6 or older. So I would expect most of you to stay on 14.6 or public versions until iOS 15 comes out. That's typically what happens. Now at this time, there's 281 comments. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of them. Xiaobin Lu says, battery life is somewhat bad. Widgets are glitching just like on iPadOS. You remove them and they come back by themselves. Otherwise, not too bad, and I look forward to beta 2. Nico says, I use iOS 15 beta 1 on my secondary device, the iPhone SE first generation, and it's working pretty well so far. The only issue I'm experiencing is that FaceTime is just completely unusable. I can't reply to any notifications I receive, and the iPhone gets abnormally hot while charging, even without using it. Battery life is pretty good and definitely better than 14.7 beta 2. I reported all of the issues in the feedback app, by the way. Love your videos, and thank you. Brendan Brown says, iPhone 12 Pro Max, it works awesome. Haven't dealt with any bugs. It's perfect for a first beta, but still kind of bummed that it doesn't feel any different from iOS 14. Cappy says, on iPhone 12 mini, working very well with little bugs. Just a few freezes here and there. Battery life seems to be better than iOS 14.7 beta. Milton Man says, I had about 3 to 4 random reboots so far on my iPhone SE 2020. Dynamic Conquest says, I love the iOS 15 beta 1. It's so smooth. I was on 14.6 public release and it was going nuts. It kept crashing and my phone was heating so much that sometimes even the frame was unbearable to hold. The iOS 15 feels like the iOS 12, a very stable and optimized version. Offline Siri doesn't work on my iPhone 12 Pro Max. Can someone help? It will work for certain requests, so it won't work for everything, but it should work for some things, according to Apple. SE75 Kenneth says he's asking about the weather animation in iOS 15 beta 1 not showing the raindrops bouncing animation. Now, according to Apple, the weather app has different animations, over 1,000 of them. So if you have heavy rain, it could bounce off the top. If you have different rain, it could just drizzle over the sides or do nothing different. It really depends, and there can be 1,000 animations according to Craig Federighi. So it really depends on the weather, and you may never see it in a year, I suppose, depending on the weather. So it's possible it just changes regularly. Sahil Prajapati, hopefully I'm saying that properly. iPhone XR was sluggish after installing iOS 15 beta, so had to restore my iPhone to iOS 14. Vasil Vadafu said, I'm testing iOS 15 beta 1 on iPhone 11 Pro Max. Honestly, so far I'm really pleased. Battery is not so bad as I expected. Some of these new features which came out with the new iOS are really helpful. Thumbs up for Aaron, and thank you. Richard Carey says, I refuse to install until my bank updates their app to be compatible. Last year, it did not happen until iOS 14 beta 5. Plus, my iPhone 12 Pro Max is my one and only, so not a wise idea on iOS 14.7 beta for now. Now, as far as banking apps or any app, technically they can't update it for iOS 15 until after it's released or the same day. So they can submit apps as we get closer to the final release. So you won't see updated apps that often. So it definitely is a good idea to wait if you have something that's very critical. Fadi Safi says, it's very good so far. Very few bugs for a first beta, but the battery is terrible. I'm getting 4 to 5 hours screen on time on my 12 Pro Max. My iPhone 10 is super laggy. I know it's an old phone, but it should be capable of running iOS 15 smoothly. Apollo Potter says, super laggy. My phone has been crashing nonstop. I'm on SE 2nd gen. Cryptic V Gamer says basically some apps, well, one game won't open and App Store is very slow and just slowness in general. Not that bad, but battery is okay and I'm using an iPhone 8 Plus. So that's it for everything with iOS 15 Beta 1. Now it's only been out for a week or so and hopefully we'll see a beta in another week. But this particular update, like I said, for me has been pretty solid, good enough that I don't need to downgrade to a previous version just to use it regularly. I can actually depend on it right now, but again, it's never a good idea to install it on your main device if you have to count on something that's critical to you. But in general, it's been pretty good. I'm sure we'll see much more stability as it goes on towards beta 7 or 8, and whenever the release candidate is. We probably will see that in September at some point. So I can't wait to see what we have. Maybe we'll have some new features or small changes as well, as they tend to refine things over time. Now, if you found anything else significant, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. And if you'd like to get your hands on this wallpaper, of course, I'll link it in the description like I normally do. If you haven't subscribed already, though, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.